After only 45 days in office, Liz Truss announced her resignation on October 20, 2022, becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister in UK history. With her resignation, Britain will now have at least 5 different Prime Ministers in a period of little over 6 years, which ought to be a world record, right? Without a doubt, the answer is no. Despite being the shortest in UK political history, Truss' reign seemed eternal in comparison to the short periods of certain other world leaders. A month at the White House. William Henry Harrison is the first American president to pass away in office, and he also held the position for the shortest period of time. In 1841, the former army officer was 68 years old at the time of his death, had only 32 days left on his mandate when he got pneumonia. India's leader for less than 2 weeks. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a former Indian Prime Minister, holds the record for the shortest term in his position, serving for just 13 days in 1996 as a result of his failure to form a coalition following legislative elections. When he ran again in 1998, his term was just 13 months long, since another coalition fell apart at that time, leading to the dissolution of Parliament. But in the elections that followed, his party did well once more, and he went on to hold office for a third time between 1999 until 2004. Argentina had 5 presidents in just 2 weeks. In December 2001, a severe economic crisis in Argentina sparked violent street protests that resulted in at least 25 fatalities. The country was in a terrible position. President Fernando de la Rúa announced his retirement on December 20th as a result of the subsequent political unrest. What followed was a spectacular series of political domino falls. De la Rúa was replaced by Ramón Puerta, while the post of vice president remained vacant after a previous resignation. 2 days later, Congress chose Adolfo Rodríguez Sá to fill the position, and Puerta left his post. However, Sá too announced his resignation within a week as his emergency economic measures lost support. Puerta was required by law to take over again as president, but he declined and resigned as president of the Senate instead. Speaker of the House of Deputies Eduardo Camino took over and was sworn in as the 4th president. Then, 3 days later, he handed over the presidency to Eduardo Duhalde, another president chosen by the Congress, who stayed in the position until the 2003 presidential elections. More temporary presidents in Latin America. In addition to the case of Argentina, there are several other instances of very brief presidential mandates in Latin America, including the military revolution that toppled President Francisco Madero in February 1913, during which the Mexican Pedro Lecumberri presided for less than an hour. On November 8, 1955, President Cavalo of Brazil was very sick, so the leader of the Chamber of Deputies, Carlos Luz, assumed the presidency. Juscelino Kubitschek had already been chosen as Brazil's new president at the time, but his tenure wasn't set to start until January 1956. However, Luz removed from his position after just 3 days at the request of the military ministry, which said that the temporary president was planning a coup to stop Kubitschek from taking the oath. Also, Mario Ramos, the then Senate leader, held the position for 2 months. A curious double record for Sierra Leone. The longest and shortest terms as president in Sierra Leone's history belong to Siaka Stevens. In 1967, after narrowly winning the election, he was deposed and imprisoned the same day he took office in a military coup. However, he ran for president again a year after the military took over and held that position from 1971 until 1985. His leadership has been characterized by authoritarianism, multiple accusation of abuses of human rights, and election fraud. Chancellor of Germany for one night. Joseph Goebbels rose to fame as the German Minister of Propaganda from 1933 to 1945. But few people are aware that he also served as Chancellor for one day, which was the highest office in the country. It happened on April 30th, in the last days of the Second World War in Europe, when Adolf Hitler, who was in charge at the moment, took his life. As Hitler's deputy, Goebbels rose to become Chancellor, but he and his wife also took their life after poisoning their 6 children. A woman president for only 15 hours. Another interesting story comes from South Africa, where after Thabo Mbeki's resignation on September 24, 2008, Ivy Matsebe-Casaburi, who was then the country's Minister of Communications, became the first woman to be president. She served as interim president for around 15 hours before Galima Motlanthe, another cabinet member, was chosen by the South African Parliament to replace Thabo Mbeki. Kings for short periods. Although kings and queens are exempt from running for office and are generally secure from Republican uprisings in current times, this does not guarantee that their rule will be long. Just take as an example Italy's King Umberto II, who ascended to the throne in 1946 following his father Vittorio Emanuele's resignation, and tried to calm the nation's rising anti-monarchical feelings by approving a referendum on the monarchy. Umberto's rule lasted just 34 days, which was a tragic outcome for the monarch since 54% of Italians opted for the republic. Dipendra Shahdev, the King of Nepal, had a tragically brief reign. Dipendra killed his parents and several members of the Nepalese royal family on June 1, 2001, in revenge for his relatives' failure to approve of his engagement to an Indian aristocrat. Dipendra then tried to take his life by shooting himself after the homicides, but he didn't die right away. Instead, he went into a coma and passed away 3 days later, during which time Dipendra was technically the King of Nepal. However, Louis XIX, the King of France, is likely the royal family member with the shortest reign on record. He replaced his father, King Charles X, on August 2, 1830, amid widespread protests against the monarch. But barely 20 minutes after taking the throne, Louis XIX abdicated in favor of his nephew, the Duke of Bordeaux, following his father's lead. You may have noticed that this list includes a number of presidents who held office just briefly the first time around, but who later had several opportunities. Do you see Liz Truss having a similar opportunity in the future? Tell us in the comments below.